So I'm interested in it. I've got sort of a hobby, sort of a, I'm not a trained historian by any means, but I took a lot of history classes in my undergrad, and I took a lot of literature classes from, the American history. I focused mainly on American literature. I do teach a class, though. It's called Constructing American Heroes, and it's a survey lit class. The point of the class at the university I teach it at is so that students will get some sort of basic coverage of some basic canon United States or American literary pieces. So that's the idea, that's the intent. And teachers are allowed to just construct the course or plan the course, design it however they want to. So I designed mine called Constructing American Heroes, and it plays into my archetypes study and whatnot. So what we do is we look at, I introduce a certain set of the sub-archetypes of heroes, in the American monomyth. We talk about the American monomyth and how it is a distinct variation of the general monomyth or hero's journey. And then we look at the sub-archetypes. So for example, we'll look at like the trickster. But what we do for each sub-archetype is that we first locate it in terms of the American literature, the American, canon and stories and whatnot. Its earliest as we can say, its most earliest instance of import. I don't know, weird way of saying it, in American literature. So for the tricksters, first we look at the American Indian trickster mythologies, that were here, before the colonists or settlers came. And we look at some of those, Raven and Coyote and so forth. I mean, there's, tons of those, all kind of variations. But we look at some, and then we trace the trickster to Joel Chandler Harris, Brer Rabbit, Brer Fox, those tales. Look it up even to the Disney version of that. And we talk about how that influences stuff like Bugs Bunny and so forth. And then eventually we get to Spider-Man. So, or some other, comic book superheroes that are also part of American literature, made in America and whatnot. And we do the same thing for all the sub-archetypes. We'll look at the frontiersmen. We start with Hawkeye in the Leatherstocking Tales, Last of the Mohicans and all of that. Our Natty Bumppo is he's named sometimes, but his Indian name is Hawkeye. So we look at that, and we'll talk about the mythologizing of Daniel Boone and Davy Crockett and all of that stuff, the American frontier. And then we look at Western, myths, Billy the Kid and so forth, and on into our science fiction, ultimately looking to heroes like, Green Lantern or Guardians of the Galaxy, or, but even Star Trek, the space is the final frontier, our frontiersmen out in a different setting. So it's a great fun class, and they get to read some important canon pieces of American literature, but we also get to, link it towards some more contemporary stuff that they've heard of and whatnot. But one thing I haven't done so much in terms of class-wise yet, though, is we do talk, like when we talk about the war hero, I talk about Washington and how it's not a history class. I'm not necessarily teaching them the real things that Washington did, but I teach them how we've mythologized our founding fathers, especially Washington, as this great war hero and whatnot. And I'm really interested in that. I love that. It's hard to talk about it with a bunch of just narrow, myopic little nerds getting their panties all in a twist. But that's not the real history. Oh, but you're perpetuating a lie because it's not the real history. I have no desire to replace real history. People should learn what really and truly happened on Paul Revere's ride, for example. But you can't just discredit or pretend like the true history of it is way superior and way more important to American culture than the myth that rose up. So yeah, Paul Revere tearing off the countryside on his horse, yelling out, "The British are coming," and saving everybody, this and that. That's a great story, and it's Wadsworth Longfellow's poem. It's great, and it should be remembered. Yes, you should also know, the little details, like he wasn't saying the British were coming. He was saying the regulars were coming because at that time they were all British. Yes, we know. Those are the persnickety little things, though, that just you guys know, because we're all geeks, right? If someone sits next to you and goes, I saw a meme that was really funny. It was when the Mandalorian show had just come out. And it was a picture of some women at a table, and there was a little golden retriever dog sitting on the floor next to the table, but the woman who owned the dog was holding the dog's mouth shut, because it was probably barking or something like that. So she was trying to keep the dog quiet or whatever. And it said, my husband, which was linked to the dog, like the dog was labeled my husband. And at the table, the women were saying, they had little speech balloons, and they were saying, "Why isn't Darth Vader in the new Boba Fett show?" So like if somebody gets something wrong that's like your geekdom, it's like, but that's not actually true because and hey, take a step back, realize that no one cares about that as much as you do. When it comes to history, yes, there's a case to be made that we should, and we do need to make sure that the real history is being taught, that people aren't mistaking the myth for the history. But one of the things I always point out in my class is how important the myth is. Yes, we get it. I know the truth about Pocahontas and her age and John Smith and all that stuff at Jamestown. I don't give a crap. I mean, that's important when I'm looking at the real history of it. But you will pry Disney's Pocahontas out of my cold, dead hands. I freaking love that movie. I love that story. I love the way it's changed and it's mythologized. It's beautiful. And it's a really, obviously that story about their love interest and whatever was long before the Disney show or Disney movie. But those stories play a pivotal role in American culture and shaping it and whatnot, even if they're not always true. So yeah, I like looking at how real historical events or people become sort of mythologized, and then how that inspires our works toward and shaping American culture. So someone says, so I guess you don't like Pocahontas 2. I don't like Pocahontas 2 as much as Pocahontas 1. It still has its charm and everything. I'm like, come on. I know she ended up with John Rolfe. Come on. Anyway. Yeah, like I made a video years ago. It was on my 40th birthday, actually. I took a trip to Colonial Williamsburg and Jamestown and all of that just on my own. I loved it. I had a blast just by myself. It was before Sound Engraver and I ever even, started dating or anything, but just loved it. And I'd been to Jamestown a number of times, and they've got this great statue there of Pocahontas kind of on the shore there. And there's a picture of of John Smith there as well. And Pocahontas has got her hands out, and it's a statue pose that's very evocative of like the Virgin Mary. And I think that's important. I think plenty times the story of Pocahontas or like Mother Virginia of the New World, or she was, she was bringing, supplies to some of the colonists at different times. This was a Church of England who severed themselves from the Catholic Church. And if you look at belief systems or mythologies or whatever throughout the world, there's always some sort of need for some kind of divine mother. And it's interesting looking at the American cause and how Lady Liberty, kind of stepped in to fill that void a little bit, in different ways. We can look at Pocahontas or whatever. But of course, the statue isn't even how a Powhatan Indian would have looked back then. It's more like a tiger lily would have looked, and the people who tour guide, they always love bringing that up. It makes them sound really smart or something, and like point it out, but stop being a dick about it. Anyway. I have and I meant to look up where you can buy this too. I'll have to, when I show this later, I'll look up and put the link. But I found this place, forget what they are, but they do posters. They do a bunch of different t-shirts, posters, magnets, whatever. But they've got this design of the founding fathers as like superheroes and superhero poses. And I got the magnet, the sticker, and the little poster here. It's so great because they're all, it's like the Justice League would be standing out there, but it's all the founding fathers. And you can look at it starts out with Paul Revere, John and Abigail Adams, got Henry Knox, Washington, Franklin, Jefferson, Madison, Marquis de Lafayette, and then Andrew or Alexander Hamilton. But I love that. So I need to get a good frame for it. It's a weird size, though, so I've yet to do that. But I've got the magnet on my fridge and everything. Love that kind of stuff. And you'll see online, too, T-shirts that have, like, some of the founding fathers in, like, the Avengers guys. You have, like, Washington as Captain America, of course. And I think it had Franklin is Iron Man because of the lightning and everything. He's, like, flying a kite, but he's got the Iron Man, logo. And John Adams was the Hulk, which kind of makes sense, if you've seen 1776 and stuff like that too. But anyway, so I love that kind of stuff.